And so now we'd like to open it up for any questions or comments you might have. And while we're doing that, I'll share some pictures from our trip from last year.
One question that I will pose for you, Christina, is can you say a little bit more about what the hotels are like? So what should we expect in terms of the accommodations?
Sure. So I have stayed in all of the hotels where we plan to stay on this trip. They are similar to what you might find here in the U.S. My favorite place we stayed was the Hotel Mona Freak in Bouake. They had mud huts and live animals roaming around the premises, and that it was really kind of what I envisioned Africa to be before I had been there before. The other locations will have one hotel right on the beach in Grand Bassam, and then there is the hotel in Abidjan where we'll spend several nights. That one is, again, very similar to what we would find in the US. And they have an amazing breakfast buffet. I can't wait to go back and have more of the food from there.
Yes, I think also, although you can stay in mud huts at Hotel Mona Freak, the mud huts have plumbing, hot water, linens. So it's not like you'll be um, needing to get out your mosquito net and your sleeping bag. Um, we have another question from one of our listeners about the kinds of health care that's available. And I will field this one. The communities that we will be in and around, and so when we're in the Abidjan area, and that includes both the days we're in Abidjan, and also when we're in Grand Bassam, we will have access to state-of-the-art hospitals, just like you would find in any fairly large city in, in the U.S. Bouake is a somewhat smaller community. There is a hospital there, but if so they certainly can deal with emergency situations. Actually, one of Sekou's friends is an ambulance driver in Bouake, so if needed, we could call a personal service. But definitely, if people need sophisticated care, they are still usually going to Paris, but that would be for things like fairly unusual surgeries or things like that. So every community that we will be visiting will be able to accommodate emergency situations. You'll be able to get prescriptions filled if you need them. Actually, like in Europe, you can go into a pharmacy and talk to the pharmacist and get a prescription for an ailment even without seeing a doctor. So that's kind of makes it even a little more accessible than if you were traveling in another state in the US. Thanks for that question. Christina, do you want to field another one?
Sure.
What about safety? Should folks have any concerns about safety, or what are the safety? What's the safety situation?
Well, I won't get into the history of that, Alicia. If you'd like to, feel free. But I felt very safe while I was there. They have what they call gendarme, which is, from my understanding, like a cross between a police officer and military personnel, and they are scattered about. You might see them around and they are armed, but I think that they're just there to keep the peace, and it was very peaceful while there. And as I touched on earlier, most places have security at the entryways, as well as metal detectors in some places. But in general, everyone we encountered, I found to be lovely and joyful and pleasant, and had no concerns about my safety. In addition to that, we'll have folks who are native of Cote d'Ivoire there with us, acting as guides and helping us with the language barrier and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I certainly want to acknowledge that there was a period of time fairly recently in the country when there was political unrest. So in late 1999, there was a military coup, and for about 10 years, the country was under the rule of a what I would call a dictator. Um, but they held democratic elections in 2010, and a democratically elected president took power in 2011. He was reelected 5 years later and is serving his second term. It's been very peaceful and just a real joy to see the country bounce back so quickly after that period, that 10-year period of time. And the really great news is they are having presidential elections next year, and there are several parties that are putting up candidates, and it seems like a really healthy and robust time. So I think there's just a very bright future, and this is it's a wonderful time to get to go and see all of that develop. A question about whether there's a question related to whether or not it's a requirement to be able to speak French. And I will say that we plan to have translators with us. As Christina said, we'll have some guides, and we are shooting for about a 1 to 4 person ratio, which means that you and your guide could get into a taxi if you needed to with your small group. And so it is definitely helpful to know a little French because there isn't much English spoken in the country, but you will have guides that will help you navigate that. Christina, there's a question about if someone has an interest in spending extra time in Paris, how would that work? Do you want to?
Sure. On the next slide is my contact information. Feel free to contact me, and we can go over the details of that.
Yeah, I would say that we would recommend planning that at the end of your trip, although if you wanted to meet us in Paris at the beginning of the trip, that's really okay. We just think from the potential for there to be travel just challenges, it would be good for us all to be trying to get there the same route heading there. But either way, we will be likely flying through Paris, and you would have an opportunity to catch up with us or leave us there. I think that looks like it addresses the questions that we have, Christina. So do you want to finish us off?
Sure. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Feel free to contact me at either the email address or number listed there if you have other questions or want to put down a deposit. And as we're bidding farewell to you today, please feel free to hang on for an extra couple of minutes and watch this video by Alpha Blondie. They show some scenes in it of Abidjan. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your week.